the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
All right, so you guys sent us a whole bunch of articles about this case with the Trump Organization suing Capital One.
Yeah.
And it seems like a pretty big deal, right? I mean, accusations of woke corporations and political bias when it comes to banking.
It's really interesting. This case kind of throws fuel on the fire of a debate that's already been going on.
Yeah.
Are these corporations using their power the right way? Or are they getting too involved in politics?
Yeah, for sure. And we've got perspectives from all over the place on this.
Yeah.
Fox News, Law 360, Courthouse News, Red State.
It seems like everybody's got an opinion.
It really does. And I think the only thing everyone agrees on is this could have some huge ripple effects.
It's like we're all kind of watching to see what happens next,
Absolutely. So let's try to break it all down.
Yeah.
The Trump Organization, with Eric Trump leading the charge, is saying that Capital One closed down over 300 of their business and personal accounts back in 2021.
Yeah.
Like no warning, no explanation, just poof, gone.
And their argument really comes down to the timing of it all. Right. This all went down not long after January 6th and the Capitol riot.
Right.
And they're saying that's no coincidence. They think Capital One caved to public pressure and tried to basically cancel them for their political views.
Yeah, and this is where things get legally tricky.
Right.
Because the Trump Organization is saying this is a violation of their First Amendment rights, specifically the freedom of association.
Oh, wow.
They're saying they can't be punished for their political beliefs, which, usually that's an argument we hear to protect marginalized groups.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so fascinating. It's like flipping the script.
Yeah.
And it forces us to really look at how these principles apply across the board.
For sure. For
Okay.
sure. Now, Capital One, on the other hand, they're denying any political motivation behind this.
Right. They're saying this was strictly business.
Yeah.
Just a business decision.
Exactly. So it comes down to, was it really about managing risk for them, or did they kind of give in to this outside political pressure?
And that's what the courts are going to have to figure out.
Yeah. So we've got this legal battle brewing, but there's an even bigger issue here, and that's this whole idea of debanking.
Right. It goes beyond just Trump.
Yeah.
It highlights this growing fear that businesses and even individuals could be denied banking services just because of their politics.
We've seen this before, right?
Oh, yeah.
And think back to Operation Choke Point during the Obama administration.
You're right.
That raised a lot of similar concerns, especially among conservatives.
Yeah. They saw that as proof that banks were being used to target certain industries or groups.
So how do we tell the difference between real risk management and potentially discriminatory practices?
Right.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and it goes beyond this one case.
Yeah.
Senator Tim Scott even proposed a law to try and fight debanking.
Right.
But it's getting pushback from people who say it could actually make it harder to fight financial crimes.
Yeah. So it's a tough situation.
It's a balancing act for sure.
Feels like we're walking a tightrope between freedom of speech, freedom of association, and then concerns about financial security.
Yeah.
How do we make all that work together?
That's the challenge. And, this case could set a precedent for how banks handle these situations in the future.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how the courts weigh all those different factors.
Yeah.
It's almost like this case is holding a mirror up to society,
It is.
making us ask some tough questions about corporate power, political polarization, individual rights.
Exactly. And depending on how the court rules this could have massive ripple effects.
Yeah.
We could see more lawsuits, maybe tighter regulations, or even our financial system getting even more fragmented than it already is.
Okay, so we've laid out the battle lines, we've got the legal context, we've touched on the possible consequences.
Right.
But to really understand all this, we need to dive into each side's arguments.
Absolutely.
Let's unpack those next.
Sounds good. So if we dig into the Trump Organization side of things, it seems like their main argument is that they were good customers. They had this long history with Capital One, and then all of a sudden they're shut down.
Right.
And they don't really feel like they got a good explanation.
And they keep bringing up the timing of it all, right?
Right.
It all went down so soon after January 6th.
Yeah, they're basically saying that Capital One just got caught up in all the cancel culture stuff that was going on.
Right.
You know, anyone who was even remotely connected to Trump after the Capitol riot was a target.
So they're saying it wasn't really about financial risk, it was about politics.
Exactly.
And they're using the First Amendment as their defense,
Mhm.
you know, the freedom of association part.
It's interesting because, like we said earlier, that's usually an argument you hear used to protect marginalized groups.
Right.
So it's a pretty unique situation legally.
It really makes you think about how those principles apply, you know, across the board.
Yeah.
But Capital One's not backing down.
No, they're sticking to their guns.
They're saying it was purely a business decision.
Right. And I'm guessing they'll argue that as a private company, they have the right to choose who they do business with, just like any other business.
Right. And I bet they'll use anything they can to support their claim.
Yeah.
Internal risk assessments, compliance policies, anything to make it look like this is just standard procedure.
Right. They might even try to say that the Trump Organization, with all the controversy and media attention surrounding them, you know, that they were just too much of a risk for their reputation,
Oh, interesting.
or that they were worried about legal issues.
Okay.
They'll try to make it seem like it was all rational and not political at all.
But how do you prove that?
Right.
How do you really know what they were thinking, whether it was really about risk or if there was some outside pressure involved?
Well, that's the tough part. It all comes down to intent, and proving that in court is really difficult.
So I guess the discovery process is going to be really important.
Oh, absolutely.
Emails, internal memos, meeting minutes, all that
All
stuff.
those little clues.
It could shed some light on what was really going on at Capital One.
Yeah, those documents could back up Capital One's story, or they could show something completely different.
It makes you think, you know, even if we put this specific case aside, there's a bigger conversation we need to be having about the role of banks in our society.
I completely agree.
This case has really brought the whole de-banking issue to the forefront.
Yeah, and it's raising some important questions.
Like, where do we draw the line with corporate power?
Right.
How do we make sure that people aren't being denied essential financial services just because of their political views?
And even if what Capital One did was legal, you know,
Right.
could it have a chilling effect on free speech?
That's a good point.
If people are afraid to speak their minds because they're worried about being debanked,
Yeah.
is that really a free society?
It's a scary thought. This is way more than just a legal fight between two parties.
It is.
It's tapping into some real anxieties about where our democracy is headed.
This case is forcing us to confront some tough questions about individual rights and corporate power in a way we haven't really had to before.
You know, speaking of free speech and all that,
Yeah.
one of the articles we read pointed out something that I thought was really ironic.
Oh, which one?
The Red State piece. It talked about how Capital One has spent years building up this friendly, approachable image with their what's in your wallet ads.
Right. They want you to feel all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have this lawsuit where they're accused of shutting down hundreds of accounts, you know, potentially discriminating against people.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark contrast.
It makes you wonder if that friendly image is all just for show.
Right. Are corporations really living up to the values they talk about, or is it all just marketing?
And are people buying it anymore? I think there's a lot more skepticism these days.
I think so, especially when a company's actions don't match their words.
This case could really damage people's trust in institutions, not just banks, but corporations in general.
I think you're right. People want to see action, not just slogans.
Okay, so we've talked about freedom of association,
Yeah.
the chilling effect on free speech, even the erosion of public trust.
Yeah.
But there's another angle I think we need to consider, and that's the impact on everyday people.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to get lost in all the legal stuff and the corporate maneuvering.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is about people.
Remember what Eric Trump said about hotels, golf courses, even skating rinks being affected by these account closures?
Yeah.
Those are real businesses with real employees and customers who are feeling the effects of this.
And those effects can be devastating.
Imagine owning a small business and suddenly you can't access your bank accounts.
How do you pay your employees,
Right,
your
yeah.
supplier?
How do you even keep your doors open?
It's like pulling the rug out from under you.
And it's not just businesses. Individuals are getting hit too.
Absolutely. Imagine trying to pay rent or buy groceries if your bank account is frozen.
Right.
It could be a financial disaster for families who are already struggling.
So this isn't just some abstract legal debate.
No, it's not.
It's having real-world consequences.
Real people are being impacted.
And that's why it's so important to have a thoughtful discussion about all this.
Yeah, we need to find a way to balance the needs of financial institutions with the rights and freedoms of individuals.
We can't just ignore the possibility of abuse or discrimination.
Right.
And we can't let fear and political polarization dictate how we access basic services.
This case is a wake-up call.
It is.
We need to be protecting our rights and holding institutions accountable.
And we need to remember the real people who are caught in the middle of all this.
Well said. This case is so complex.
It is.
It's important to look at it from all sides.
You know, as we're talking, I keep thinking about something you mentioned earlier about the potential outcomes of this lawsuit.
You mean the different scenarios and what they could mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are the most likely possibilities here, and how could they impact the future of banking, even our society as a whole?
Well, one possibility is that the case gets settled out of court.
That happens a lot, right?
It does, especially with high-profile cases like this.
Yeah.
It's a way for both sides to avoid the risks and the cost of a long trial.
Right.
And in this case, both the Trump Organization and Capital One have a lot to lose if all their dirty laundry gets aired out in court.
So what would a settlement look like?
Well, it could involve Capital One reopening some or all of those closed accounts, maybe issuing a public apology and possibly paying the Trump Organization some money for damages.
That wouldn't really set a legal precedent, would it?
Not really. It would be more like a private agreement between them,
Okay.
a way to resolve the dispute without either side admitting they did anything wrong or establishing any big legal principles.
So it wouldn't necessarily change how banks operate or address these debanking concerns in the future.
Right. Another possibility is that the case goes to trial and the jury sides with the Trump Organization.
That would be a huge win for them.
It would be a major victory. It would send a clear message that banks can't discriminate against their customers based on their political beliefs. And it could encourage other people who feel like they've been unfairly targeted to fight back.
Could it lead to new laws or regulations to protect consumers from debanking?
It's possible a ruling like that could create some momentum for legislative action,
Okay.
especially since Senator Scott's bill is already out there. But it's important to remember that any court decision could be appealed,
Right.
and this whole legal battle could drag on for years.
So even if the Trump Organization wins, it's not over?
Nope. The legal system moves slow, and there could be a lot of twists and turns along the way. And of course, there's always the chance that the jury sides with Capital One.
What kind of impact would that have?
Well, that would be a big blow to the Trump Organization and their claims of political bias.
Mm-hmm.
It would basically validate the argument that banks have the right to make their own business decisions based on their own risk assessments,
Right.
even if those decisions are unpopular or controversial.
And it could make it harder for other people to challenge these kinds of practices in the future.
It could create a sense of buyer beware in the banking world, where people are afraid to speak up or do things that might get them debanked.
Right.
It could have a chilling effect on free speech and activism.
So no matter what happens, this case is a pivotal moment.
It really is.
It could have a huge impact on how banks operate and how we think about freedom of speech and association.
Absolutely. It has the potential to reshape the relationship between individuals, corporations, and the government.
Yeah.
And it could change how we understand freedom of speech and association in this digital age.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the full picture now. We've got this legal battle with high stakes, competing arguments about corporate power and individual rights. And then you've got real people whose lives and livelihoods are on the line.
And we're just scratching the surface.
Okay.
There's another layer to this whole debanking thing that we need to explore.
I'm all ears. What are you thinking? So we've talked about the human impact, the legal battles, the political side of things. But what about the role of technology in all this? It feels like that's the big thing nobody's really talking about.
It's a good point. You know, we live in a time where algorithms are making more and more decisions.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to money.
Right. And those algorithms are kind of a mystery.
They're like a black box.
Exactly. Banks are using these complex systems to assess risk, decide who gets loans, even flag suspicious activity.
Right.
But do we really understand how they work?
Not really, and that's the problem. There's just not a lot of transparency.
Yeah.
We don't always know what information they're using, how much weight they're giving it, or if it's even accurate.
And that makes you worry about fairness and accountability, right?
Yeah.
What if these algorithms are accidentally making things worse?
Right.
Or even being used on purpose to discriminate against certain groups?
It's a legitimate concern. We've seen it happen in other industries.
Yeah.
Where algorithms have discriminated based on things like race, gender, even where you live.
Right.
And if that's happening in banking, it could be a big problem.
Imagine being denied a loan or having your account flagged just because an algorithm made a bad decision
Yeah.
based on bad data or some biased assumption.
It's like a digital scarlet letter, and you might not even know why you're being targeted.
And that's what's so scary about it. these algorithms can make decisions in a split second.
Yeah.
With huge consequences, and we often have no way to fight back or even understand why it happened.
It's true.
So this isn't just about whether Capital One did the right thing or not.
Right.
It's about the bigger question of how we make sure technology is being used ethically and responsibly when it comes to our money.
Exactly. We need banks and tech companies to be more open about how these things work.
Yeah.
We need to understand how these algorithms are designed and used, and we need safeguards to prevent discrimination and make sure people can challenge these decisions if they need to.
It feels like we're at a turning point. Technology is changing everything about finance.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure those changes are good for everyone, not just a few.
It's going to take collaboration between policymakers, regulators, tech companies, and consumers.
Right.
We need to have these conversations now before it's too late.
This whole conversation has really opened my eyes.
Yeah.
You know, I started out thinking this was just a lawsuit between a company and a bank.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
It really is. It's about who has the power in our society, the role technology plays in our lives, and the basic rights and freedoms that we often take for granted.
It's about the kind of future we want. Do we want algorithms making all the decisions?
Right.
Or do we want humans to stay in control, guided by fairness, transparency, and accountability?
That's the question we all need to be asking. In this case, with all the controversy surrounding it, is a reminder that the stakes are high.
I think you're right.
Oh.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have the legal battles, the political arguments, the human impact, and the role of technology. It's all connected.
I hope we've given our listeners plenty to think about.
Me too. Hopefully, we've encouraged them to learn more about these issues and form their own opinions.
Because at the end of the day, the more informed we are as individuals, the better we can navigate this complex world and create the future we want to see.
I agree with that.
So until next time, keep those questions coming, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into the issues that matter most.
You Democrats, bleed with a threats like a New York sewer rat. Go away, don't come back. Go away, don't come back. Savage policies destructive. Deep Dive Podcast Show. Let's dive in. On the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition, in this land we found. We cherish our Constitution.